Every day, it seems we have more evidence that the deep state is covering up for the same old corrupt political establishment. This happened over a month ago. A lawyer filed a grievance against Hillary Clinton and her lawyers. This was over the email scandal. A Maryland judge, this was reported in July, when a Maryland judge allowed a grievance to move forward against Hillary Clinton's lawyers, saying the bar's refusal to investigate the lawyers seems to violate the state's policy. The lawyer who filed the grievance, Ty Clevenger, called the decision last week this was in July, he called it a surprise victory, and this is concerning Mrs. Clinton's secret email server, which she used during her time in the State Department. The argument by Clevenger was that Mrs. Clinton bungled the handling of emails, and she and her lawyers misled Congress initially in describing how the messages were belatedly processed for return to the government. He's asked that the former secretary and her lawyers be disbarred. So this was a month ago that this was reported, and the FBI has responded, and the response would almost be laughable if it wasn't evident of the gross corruption that is still rampant throughout our government. The FBI, in their response, said that a lack of public interest justifies withholding the documents related to Clinton. This is the most recent report. It reads, Hillary Clinton's case isn't interesting enough to the public to justify releasing the FBI's files on her, the Bureau said this week in rejecting an open records request by a lawyer seeking to have the former Secretary of State punished for perjury. Ty Clevenger, this is the lawyer, he has been trying to get Mrs. Clinton and her personal lawyers disbarred for their handling of her official emails during her time as Secretary of State. He's met with resistance among lawyers, and now his request for information from the FBI's files has been shot down. This has just been reported today. This was Monday that they responded, the FBI. So the Washington Times is reporting on this. They're saying the FBI, in their record management section chief, they've responded in a letter saying you have not sufficiently demonstrated that the public's interest in disclosure outweighs personal privacy interests of the subject. This is according to David M. Hardy, the FBI records management section chief, in a letter to Clevenger. Goes on to write, it is incumbent upon the requester to provide documentation regarding the public's interest in the operations and activities of the government before records can be processed pursuant to the Freedom of Information Act. Mrs. Clinton is the 2016 Democratic presidential nominee, of course, former chief diplomat, former U.S. senator, and former first lady of both the U.S. and Arkansas. Seems pretty self-evident that it would be in the public interest to have this information. Her use of a secret email account to conduct government business while leading the State Department was front-page news for much of 2015 and 2016. This article points out, goes on to read, it was also so striking that the then FBI director broke with procedure and made both a public statement and appearances before Congress to talk about the Bureau's probe. In the end, the FBI didn't recommend charges against Mrs. Clinton, as we all know how this played out, concluding that while she risked national security, she was too technologically inept to know the dangers she was running. This was what they were claiming at the time, so no case could be made against her. So this is what they were saying at the time. The FBI says it will only release records from its files if a subject consents, is dead, or is of such public interest that it overrides privacy concerns. Mr. Clevenger, the lawyer who's filed this grievance, said he thought it would be clear why Mrs. Clinton's case was of public interest, but he sent documentation anyway, pointing to a request by members of Congress for an investigation into whether Mrs. Clinton perjured herself in the testimony to Capitol Hill. This was the quote from the lawyer to the Washington Times. He says, I'm just stunned. This is exactly what I would have expected had Mrs. Clinton won the election, but she didn't. And we've seen this in many different scandals that I've covered through this channel. It seems that there is great holdover from the Obama administration, and this lawyer says in this case, he says it looks like the Obama administration is still running the FBI or their handling of this case. This is what the lawyer that's filed this grievance says. He goes on to say, how can a story receive national news coverage and not be a matter of public interest? If this is the new standard, then there's no such thing as a public interest exception. If this doesn't meet that criteria, then what would? The FBI didn't return a message seeking comment today, on how it balances public interest versus privacy and open records requests. Seeking to clear up any confusion over the level of public interest, one person forwarded to the Washington Times a petition started on the White House website to demand the release of documents. The assumption made by Mr. Hardy that such a release is not in the public interest is invalid, and the FBI should immediately release these documents, said the petition started by the user. I'm not sure if I can vouch for these White House petitions. From what I understand, they do prompt an official response from the White House. So at the very least, you would have some sort of public on-record response to this issue, I guess, if they reach the 100,000 signature threshold. I think that's how this website works. I'll add this to the description of this video. I'm sure most people would not agree with the FBI's ruling on not releasing these documents. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. I will add the link to the petition if you would like to sign it. It's completely up to you, but I'm sure that many people are interested in this case. We'll have to see how the FBI responds to that. Leave a comment if you leave a like on this video. It's greatly appreciated, and subscribe to the channel. I will follow up shortly. Thanks, everyone.